think that silver's true value will come out once, like you said, it's right in your face, blatantly obvious, the supply deficit, where we can't manipulate the price. You know, J.P. Morgan spoofing. I feel like it goes much deeper, like you said, even the government. But I feel like the year 2025, 2026 is when you won't be able to deny it. I feel like we'll be deep enough into the Green New Deal by then. Electric vehicles, every automobile company by the year 2030 is going to be an EV, they say. Just the amount of silver we'll need by then, how many billions of ounces, who knows? I feel like by then, silver's natural price, the critical role it plays is going to be undeniable. That's just my opinion. Obviously, a wrench could get thrown in and things,
Let me give you mine, and I think it's similar, only it might be sooner. So like I said, I often ask people, what makes the dollar the world reserve currency, and so few people can ever answer it. It used to be backed by gold, and at the end of World War II, gold was appointed or anointed the world reserve currency, taking over for the pound sterling. And the U.S. said to the world, we will peg gold at a rate of $35 an ounce. And you can exchange your dollars for gold anytime, and we'll give you $35. It was a good deal for the rest of the world. It was a good deal for us because this is why we owned most of the world's gold. So they would give us their gold, and we'd pay them $35 an ounce for it. We'd hold it safely, and they would buy our treasuries with the proceeds, which would finance our infrastructure, which would then give them a return for our non-interest-bearing asset. After all, they could exchange it for $35 an ounce, so why not give the gold to a safe place? Allies, they're strong, they just won the war, they're not going to screw us. They'll give us, buy it back at 35, and in the meantime, we can exchange it and buy treasuries and make a return on this asset. And it was this way until the end of the Vietnam War, when President de Gaulle from France realized that we were printing more dollars in treasuries to fund the war than we had behind, backing it at Fort Knox. So he sent warships over from New York Harbor filled with dollar bills and said, give us back our gold. And we did. And they bled down half the gold at the Treasury, nearly. And Nixon closed the gold window in August of 1971. And that was, at that point, the dollar was backed by nothing. But it was 3 years later that Henry Kissinger went to Saudi Arabia and said to the Saudi kingdom, we'll protect you. We will provide you ammunition and munitions, rather, and we will have your back militarily. Before that, no one will ever mess with you. You have to denominate oil globally through OPEC in dollars. And they said, okay. And so for the last 50 years, nearly every country on the planet has had to own dollars to buy oil, nearly 100%. It's created a synthetic demand. It's called the petrodollar. This is the world reserve currency because of our protection of the Saudi kingdom. Well, the day that we left Afghanistan with our tail between our legs, with people hanging from the wing of a transport plane, the country that I grew up in, I'm going to be 52 in a few weeks, you didn't leave military people or allies or troops behind enemy lines because they couldn't make it to the extraction point. You didn't do that. We did. And I think it was a humiliating time for this country, certainly for the administration. I was very distraught by it, like really upset. And there's no coincidence in the timing of this announcement. The day after that, after the world is saying, what a bunch of fools, Saudi Arabia announced a joint military cooperation agreement with Russia. Let me say that one more time.
Wow.
A joint military cooperation agreement with Russia. You can Google all this, and you will see that Russia is now protecting Saudi Arabia. The day after that, Russia announced the same thing with Nigeria. The day after that, Nigeria's third or fourth or fifth largest OPEC producing country. The day after that, they announced that they had hypersonic ICBMs on all of their nuclear-powered submarines. Now, this is the technology we don't have, that the State Department said they're concerned about. These are the missiles that go Mach 10 up in the atmosphere and hit the ground at the speed of an asteroid. You can't knock them down. That was their way of saying, don't fuck with us, the way you did Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, when they both said they wanted to sell their oil for things other than the dollar.
Wow.
So We fast forward, we see that Nigeria has already agreed to sell their oil to China for yuan. It is a yuan-denominated bond called the petro-yuan bond. The petro-yuan bond is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. This is why the Shanghai Gold Exchange has delivered almost 95 times more gold than COMEX has over the last few years, because countries like Iran, who want to evade U.S. sanctions, will sell their oil to China for the petro-yuan bond and immediately convert it into gold. This is how they sidestep it. So you have, for the very first time in 50 years, someone else protecting the Saudi kingdom, which gives us our exclusive dollar hegemony. If we back up a year and look at 2020, we see the rise of the Chinese Belt Road Initiative. A lot of people don't know about this either. The Belt Road Initiative is the largest infrastructure project ever attempted in human history. Now, I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to connect these dots.
No, I'm engaged. This is awesome.
You're going to like, and all of these things I invite people to Google. The biggest infrastructure project in human history called the Chinese Belt Road Initiative. It is connecting Asia and Africa and parts of Europe. It's the old Silk Road. It is connecting 75% of human population. 45% of global GDP before industrialization, not just by bridges and roads and maritime channels and railroads, but also digitally. So you're connecting 75% of human population digitally. The need for silver is extraordinary. And the U.S. is not part of it. And all of the contracts on the Belt Road are settling on the new Chinese digital yuan. The digital yuan, which I believe will be the backbones of the new world reserve currency, I'll get to that in a moment, has already done close to 20 billion in successful transactions.
Oh, wow.
They did it at the Olympics, and all of the trades on the Belt Road are settling in the new digital yuan. So we see subsequently things like Russia, obviously, selling their oil for ruble and for gold. We see Nigeria selling their oil to China for the yuan. We see Saudi Arabia announce that they are contemplating, if they say it publicly, they're already doing it, selling their oil for yuan in China, the yuan-denominated bond, which they can convert to gold. We've seen other types of relationships where Hungary and Turkey want to join the Belt Road Initiative, and in fact, Turkey is about this close to doing it. Hungary wants to sell their, buy Russian oil and not use dollars. We see India that just came out. We're their largest trading partner that said all domestic and international trades will be done in rupee, no longer in dollars. We see Saudi Arabia, who just came out and said, we are contemplating joining the BRICS nation. What? Really? And that's not talked about in our media. And again, when they say contemplate, that means they're doing it. Google it. You'll see. There's a picture of all of the leaders of the BRICS nations standing arm to arm. Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa. Now you've got Iran just joined it. Venezuela just joined it. You're going to see Turkey join it. Saudi Arabia is going to join it. You're talking 90% of human population. All of it in settling their trade outside the dollar. This is a huge, huge, huge deal. I'm going to tell you how I think this all happens, what possibly could happen in a second. If we go back 1 year before 2020, we go to 2019, we see gold being reclassified by the Bank of International Settlements as the world's only other Tier 1 reserve asset. Why did they do that? Everyone in this industry thought it would be special drawing rights by the International Monetary Fund, which is about 200 countries around the world, who that same year came out and said, we want a new Bretton Woods. We want a new system on their website. No one talks about this. So you see this thing where 80, 90% of the world's population is moving away from the dollar, striking unilateral trade deals, usurping the dollar, selling their commodities for anything but the dollar, joining together in a conglomerate, coalescing in the BRICS conglomerate, whereby you're talking north of 80, 85% of human population that is all moving away from the dollar. So how does all of this happen? How does it all break? I think this is how it potentially could break. We see that in the last 3 years, the U.S. government printed more money in the last 3 years than they had printed in the entire history of the country.
Are you still there?
All of, yep, oops, did
Okay.
I cut out there?
Yeah. It's
Where'd you lose me?
blurry. Okay. You were talking about the U.S. printed the last 3 years more money than it ever has. Okay, now you're back. You're back.
Right, in
Okay.
the last 3 years, they've printed more money than they have in the history of the United States before that. All of this money has blown up asset prices to all-time highs, stocks, bonds, real estate, cryptos, all of it inversely correlated to a rise in rates. You look at the Federal Reserve, who has no intention of getting tough on rates, because if they did, they would have raised the federal funds rate higher than 2.25%. They would have started to sell off their balance sheet, quantitatively tightening, as they call it, which they really haven't done whatsoever. And if they really wanted to get tough on rates, they would raise the federal funds rate above the bullshit rate of inflation that they call 9.1%. There was a study that just came out the other day from the National Economic Bureau, or whatever their acronym is, that said the 13.6% inflation in 1980, if measured by today's metrics, would be 9.1%. Paul Volcker, back then, raised the federal funds rate to 19.75% in 1980 to stop inflation. But what would that do now? So the Fed, who says they're going to get tough on inflation, pussyfoots around and raises it to 2.25% and hardly sells anything off their balance sheet, because if they start selling mortgage-backed securities and U.S. Treasuries interest rates spike, they don't want to be written about in the history books. So here's how it happens. You got asset prices to the moon, all inversely correlated to a rise in rates. You see all of the countries moving against the dollar and coalescing and formulating trade routes, infrastructure, and deals that are usurping the dollar completely and totally. Then the U.S. does something that I wonder, was it intended or unintended? Are they completely idiotic to not know what was going to happen, or are they maniacal? And do they want to blow everything up and realize that let's find a villain? It's no more foolish for me to say what I'm about to say than Biden saying Putin caused inflation. Inflation is always an increase in the money supply coupled with a decrease in productivity. Think about the last 3 years. More money has been printed in the last 3 years than the history of the country combined, and everyone was paid to sit on their ass and not work. That's inflation. No one's producing stuff, and more money is chasing less stuff. That's inflation, not Putin. So there's a villain, right? Because if the Fed really were to raise rates high enough, they'd blow everything up, right? Stocks, bonds, and real estate. Pop, poof, gone. So you weaponize the dollar, and you kick Russia out of SWIFT. And as the world reserve currency, it's not our job to tell the world who can and can't use it. That should be for the world opinion, not for us to dictate. And everyone else is thinking to themselves, are we next? China has just sold $100 billion of our treasuries in the last 6 months. They have their eyes set on Taiwan. You think they're going to buy our bonds anymore if they are waiting to be sanctioned and have their assets frozen? Of course not. They're all de-dollarizing, moving away. So here's what happens. You incentivize the world to move away by weaponizing the dollar. You push Russia right into the open arms of the Chinese and their CIPS system, the cross-interbank payment system, which mirrors the SWIFT. They have all of these infrastructure things put into place already, and all of the countries are starting to coalesce with them. You have Saudi Arabia says we are going to join the BRICS nations. Google it. You'll see it. And when they announce it like that, it's done. It's just a matter of how it rolls out. And if you think our president, who can't even chew gum and walk 4 feet without falling, went to Saudi Arabia to beg for oil, I have a bridge to sell you. He didn't go there. He hasn't even gone to Texas and the Texas-Mexican border yet. Yet he goes to Saudi Arabia to ask for more oil when we are specifically blowing up their way of life by going completely green. No, that's not what it was. It was to beg for them not to join the BRICS nations. But here's how it all ends. Here's your great reset, right? I always thought Klaus Schwab was an idiot until I thought of it this way. Asset prices up here. Debt up here. Inversely correlated to a rise in rates. What do? You kick Russia out, you incentivize the world, and then Saudi Arabia says to the world, hey, thanks for the memories. It's been a great ride for the last 50 years, but we are joining the BRICS nations. And our brothers and sisters, Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, now Iran, Venezuela, all of these other countries are joining together, and we're going to open up oil sales in all of these currencies. Now, Nigeria is part of the Belt Road Initiative. They're being protected by China and Russia. Russia is protecting Saudi Arabia. They're all part of the BRICS. We're not going to go do to Saudi Arabia and Nigeria what we did to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi. If they make that announcement, that simple announcement, remember that every country on the planet for the past 50 years has had to hold dollars in order to buy oil. Every one, right? So what if they make that announcement in all of those countries, just like in the movie Trading Places, when one of the Duke brothers says, sell, Mortimer, sell, because everyone's going to dump dollars. Because if they don't have to own dollars anymore to buy oil, and they watch all of the countries start to shed dollars, it'll become a hot potato. And one will sell, the next will sell, the next will sell. And all of a sudden, those dollars come home, creating massive inflation, maybe hyperinflation. What happens to interest rates in a hyperinflationary environment? They go to the moon. What happens to stocks, bonds, and real estate? Like that. So in a matter of seconds, not only does the dollar crater, there's pillar number one, but stocks, bonds, and real estate crater at the exact same time as they're inversely correlated to a rise in rates. So a great reset would be nothing more than incentivizing the world to move away from the dollar and Saudi Arabia to ditch the dollar for sole currency. But it gets worse. Last week, the BRICS nations just announced they are issuing and have already developed a new world reserve currency.
Oh, wow.
Google it. China and Russia said on behalf of the BRICS nations, we are issuing a new world reserve currency. Now, here's what I think ultimately will happen with that. The RICS and BRICS, Russia, China, India, South Africa, these are all the biggest gold-producing countries in the world and the biggest accumulators of it in the world. You have the Belt Road Initiative and the digital yuan, which has already done almost 20 billion in successful transactions in the last 2 years.
Wow.
What better way to roll out a central bank digital currency than on the heels or on the back of one that's already been tested? All of these countries will pledge gold to it, and it will be pegged to a new world reserve currency using the central bank digital currency distributed ledger technology. Gold is now a tier one reserve asset out of nowhere. Remember, they levied gold to a tier one in 2019, and they've all been accumulating it since then, right? So put all the pieces together. Chinese and the BRICS nations could very quickly issue a new currency on a distributed ledger, pegging gold to it. Now, they won't make it convertible because all from France proved that convertible currencies convert, but they'll peg it, and they'll use the distributed ledger technology to see, there's all the gold that all of us countries have pledged to. You can see what India has put in, South Africa, Brazil, Russia, China, and it's all pegged. And then Saudi Arabia, to put the icing on the cake, starts to sell oil and other currencies. The global divestiture of dollars would be immediate, and the rise in rates would be immediate as that inflation starts to overwhelm the United States. And that's when the other assets, stocks, bonds, and real estate, all collapse.
Yeah.
It's your great reset. This is why you buy gold and silver. It's not to get wealthy. It's because this time, as we were talking about earlier, this time it's not the same as before. This isn't the same crash as before. This isn't the same problem as before. For the first time in all of our lives, we are facing losing the world reserve status.
Wow.
And what that means is far greater and far more intense than anything we've ever lived for, should it potentially happen.